Amazing discovery. Millionaire exposes hidden bond between cleaning lady and his special daughter. Jonathan Miller stared at the headlines flashing across his phone, incredulous. The notion that a cleaning lady could influence his daughter's life was not just absurd, it was a direct threat to his carefully curated success. His heart raced, each beat an echo of the internal chaos threatening to unravel his world. Here he was, a self-made millionaire in Silicon Valley, and the whispers of a mundane domestic worker were rising to a crescendo, threatening to drown out the symphony of his accomplishments. Mia was special, he knew that. Yet as he dove deeper into the abyss of his thoughts, something gnawed at him, a twinge of uncertainty. Her vibrant artwork had dazzled judges, earning her accolades, and, dare he say, attention he longed for himself. But who had nurtured that talent? Rosa, their cleaning lady. She spent hours with Mia, laughing, teaching her to paint, showing her a world Jonathan was too busy to engage with. It made his stomach churn just thinking about it. Thoughts collided in his racing mind. Was he proud of Mia? Absolutely. Did he envy Rosa? Of course. She was extracting joy and creativity from his daughter while he was shackled to spreadsheets, boardrooms, and endless calls. It felt like betrayal. Still, Jonathan's fear darkened, questioning if those precious moments Mia spent with Rosa were eclipsing his role as a father. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Sweat pricked his brow as he thought about confronting Rosa. The idea felt like a betrayal itself, revealing his prejudice and arrogance. But what about his image, his reputation? In his mind, he was wrestling with a monster, in part fueled by his relentless determination to succeed, contrasted starkly against the tender heart of a little girl so desperately seeking his validation. What if the world saw Mia not as a beacon of his success, but as someone made better by the hands cleaning his floors? It made his blood run cold. Time stretched and twisted. Each tick of the clock taunted him. He imagined Mia chatting and giggling with Rosa, memories of them splattering paint across canvases, laughter bouncing off the pristine white walls of his mansion, fingers smudged with colors, pure joy existing in a space he had opted out of. Each memory stabbed at the heart of his pride, ripping at the fabric of who he thought he was.
As he prepared to confront Rosa, tingling anxiety electrified his veins. The impending clash filled him with an urgency he had never felt before. How would he sever the bond? Should he even do it? A storm brewed inside him. Feelings of desperation and determination clashed. Which path would he take? Every ounce of parental instinct urged him to protect Mia. Yet, which version of protection would he choose? As he stepped toward the living room, where the soft sounds of their laughter echoed, Jonathan found himself standing on the precipice of a decision that could forever alter their family's landscape. The weight of each potential outcome squeezing his chest tighter than he ever thought possible. The laughter faded into silence as Jonathan stepped into the room, the vibrant energy dissipating like air from a balloon. He searched for Mia, her small figure hunched over a canvas, but his gaze was drawn to Rosa, her presence unwavering, somehow both comforting and unsettling. He immediately felt the scales tilting again, questioning everything he had built, his empire, his identity, his worth as a father. "Mia, could you come here for a moment?" His voice emerged strained, more a command than a plea, a reflection of the turmoil within him. Mia looked up, her eyes gleaming with innocence, unaware of the struggle unfolding in real time. She moved to his side, her artistic passion clothed in colorful smocks, her hands still flecked with vibrant paint. For a brief moment, Jonathan felt proud, but it was quickly overshadowed by anger and jealousy. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Her soft voice tugged at his heartstrings, filling him with loaded emotions he was scrambling to understand. He hesitated before turning to Rosa. "I need to talk to you for just a moment." Each word felt like a deliberate step toward confrontation, each syllable heavy with accusation. Rosa met his gaze, unflinching, and an odd sense of respect surged in him. She had been a consistent presence, the thread weaving through the fabric of Mia's emerging talent. "Of course, Mr. Miller." Her tone was steady, neither defensive nor subservient. A quiet strength rippled beneath her exterior, and Jonathan, for an instant,
recognized it as skill, the kind he had honed in his business dealings. "I appreciate what you've done for Mia," he began, his voice tinged with the jagged edges of vulnerability. "But how much time do you spend with her? I mean, really, a day?" Rosa studied him. "As much time as she needs, Mr. Miller. You know I'm here to work, but it's more than just cleaning. We connect through art." A wave of frustration flooded Jonathan. "You realize she's my daughter, right? She should be spending that time with me, not with you." The moment lingered, the air thick with unreported grievances. Rosa's eyes sparkled, not with mirth, but with an understanding that rivals his own. Maybe it's not about who she should spend time with, but who inspires her.
Her words struck him, igniting a flicker of introspection. Here was a woman who had a crucial role in fueling his daughter's creativity, something he had neglected due to his singular focus on success. "What do you know about inspiration?" he snapped, an instinctive barb birthed out of fear. The conflict within him was spilling over, transforming into defensiveness. Mia's eyes widened, confusion replacing her previous amusement. "Daddy, Rosa helps me. She's my friend." A mixture of rage and hurt churned inside Jonathan. Did his daughter know how much he wanted acceptance from her? How much he desperately sought to remain relevant in her life? "You can't be friends with her. You need to focus on your art and—" Rosa interjected calmly. "And what? Your approval? Shouldn't Mia's happiness matter more?" The question landed like a well-aimed arrow. Jonathan's defenses crumbled inward. It was a revelation he had dreaded, a bitter truth he had overlooked in his pursuit of control and success. But how could he reconcile the stark identity he had constructed with the person he was quickly becoming? The room felt suffocating as tension enveloped them. Jonathan realized he had two paths ahead: continue down the road of paternal entitlement, or open himself up to a world where love and artistic expression reigned supreme. Breath caught in his throat. Jonathan stood, a battleground brewing between clashing identities. Would he pivot and take a step toward understanding, or would pride continue to dictate his choices? And in that moment, with the silence now deafening, he felt the irreversible push toward a decision that would alter not just the dynamics of their family, but his entire essence. The time had come to face not just Rosa, but the reality of who he had become. The first tremors of self-doubt rippled through Jonathan as he registered the weight of Rosa's words, their implications unnervingly sharp. A quiet hum of realization began to crack through the layers of the persona he had carefully constructed. For years he had been a titan of industry, confident in his decisions, relentless in his quest for success. But now the prospect of navigating through this labyrinth of emotional complexity felt foreign and disorienting. "Love," he murmured, almost to himself. Could it really mean relinquishing control, stepping back from the pedestal he had built? It was unnerving to consider that the foundation of his fatherhood could be shaken by someone who wasn't of his blood, yet the truth lingered like a specter in the room. Rosa, an invitation in her presence, stood waiting. As in his business dealings, he sensed the need to outmaneuver. "Do you think I'm not involved in her life?" His tone dripped with a challenge, masking the vulnerability that threatened to expose his uncertainty. "Mr. Miller," she began, her voice advocating for clarity, "I believe you want the best for Mia, but that does not merely equate to spending time with her on your terms."
It's about understanding what fuels her passion and letting her explore that freely. The notion struck him like a burst of cold air. Perhaps he had unwittingly become a gatekeeper instead of a guide. Each moment spent with Mia was a testament to the art he thought he could share with her. Yet in his obsession to mold her into a reflection of himself, he hadn't seen her brilliance shining through in her own way. An artist, independent and vibrantly creative. His throat felt tight. Each word felt like a decision looming over his head. "Are you suggesting I'd step aside, to give you the room to cultivate her craft?" The defensiveness swelled again, but beneath it simmered curiosity, a conflict between his instinct to protect and his growing awareness that guarding her too fiercely could stifle her growth. Rosa's expression softened, a glimmer of solidarity shining through. "I'm here to support her, not to replace you. Your bond with her is irreplaceable, but it needs to be built on trust, not control." With those few simple words, Jonathan's internal monologue spiraled into deeper questions. What did trust look like in this new dynamic? Would it mean accepting that Mia might thrive under another's guidance?
How could he allow that without feeling diminished? He had built glass walls around his life, and now these walls felt like a prison, one he wasn't entirely sure how to escape. "Is this what you want?" he asked, looking down at Mia, her focus completely absorbed in her canvas. Her remarkable concentration was a mirror to what he had neglected during his years spent chasing power and recognition. Did she want his validation, or was she already drifting into a realm where her happiness eclipsed his expectations? Rosa observed quietly, waiting patiently as Jonathan wrestled with the transition he must undergo. In that moment, he did not just see an artist nurturing a child. He saw an opportunity to also reclaim missed moments in his own life. He could invest in Mia's artistry, yes, but perhaps the greater challenge was rediscovering his childlike wonder. As the palpable silence thickened, Jonathan felt a rush of determination begin to shift the ground beneath him. He couldn't fight this revelation any longer. The path of love, fragile and uncertain as it felt, beckoned him closer to Mia than ever before. He hesitated, a confession trailing in the air. Instead of words, he pondered whether it was time for actions to speak louder. But before he could voice his commitment, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The outside world had jerked him back momentarily, a stark reminder of the turbulent life he could retreat to. As the brightness of the screen illuminated his face, tension crackled through the air, casting shadows on the clarity he had just begun to uncover. Would he answer the call, retreat back into familiar chaos, or would he take a risk, forging a new path to healing?
The phone's insistent buzz echoed in the silence. A choice hung suspended in the air, fraught with consequence. Jonathan stared at the screen, the name flashing before him, pulling him back into the chaos of his responsibilities. The call symbolized all the distractions, the demands that he had woven into the fabric of his identity. Momentarily, he felt the pull of the familiar rush, the meetings, the deadlines that granted him a sense of purpose, albeit shallow. As he felt the weight of his decision, glancing at Mia, still lost in her paint and the world of her creation, he realized that this moment was more than just a choice between two lives. It was a test of the man he wanted to be, a clasping of his old self to the uncertainties of his new direction. A deeper voice within him urged him towards action, not merely out of defiance against external pressure, but towards an authentic connection with his daughter. "Damn it," he muttered to himself, the words pushing through a storm of conflicting thoughts. He put the phone down on the table without answering, choosing instead to focus on the quiet determination growing in his chest. What was once an unwavering pursuit of success now felt like a shroud that veiled his true aspirations. He leaned closer to Mia, taking in the vibrant strokes of her artwork. Each flicker of her brush was a silent declaration of independence and creativity. In that moment, he could see the parts of himself he had left behind, the boy who felt joy in creation, the young man who could wander through art galleries and feel alive. The stark contrast of their realities hung heavy in the air. Could he still be Jonathan Miller, the Titan, yet also a father who embraced vulnerability? In being present with Mia, was he prepared to redefine not only his relationship with her, but also with himself? "Do you want a critique or just a chat about what's inside your head?" he asked, his voice softer, the edge vanishing. Mia's face lit up at his question, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Can we do both? It's not just about the painting. I've got ideas, and I want to share them with someone who gets it." As she explained her thoughts, Jonathan began to realize that the task of being a guide didn't have to eclipse his own vision. The two could coexist, a web of connections woven between them. He found himself genuinely engrossed, the threads of their discussion plunging him into a realm he hadn't explored in years. It wasn't about control anymore, but about nurturing a budding creative spirit. With every laugh, every exchange, Jonathan felt barriers within himself beginning to crumble. The glass walls that had kept his emotions locked away started to shatter piece by piece. Yet, amidst this promising shift, lurking shadows of deep-rooted fears still clung to the edges of his thoughts. Would this new path be sustainable? Would he have the resilience to stand when the weight of doubt pressed upon him?
As he caught Rosa's eye for a brief second, her silent encouragement wrapped in trust, those fears crept closer. "I'm proud of you, Mia," he exclaimed, the sentiment emerging from a depth he had seldom accessed.
and it felt good. But just as reassurance washed over him, the phone buzzed again violently, slicing through the tranquility. This time the caller was someone who demanded urgent attention, carrying expectations that always threatened to eclipse his personal growth. The sound echoed through the air, like a knife drawing the tension tighter. Jonathan's resolve faced its first true test. As he glanced back at Mia, the decision weighed heavily. Was he willing to step fully into the light of this new reality, battling against the storms of his old life? The answer hovered just out of reach as he put a finger over the screen to silence the call. Freedom, it seemed, would come only with a price. But perhaps the next step was just within his grasp, an extraordinary discovery waiting to unfold. Taking a slow, steady breath, Jonathan discovered he must confront what had been both an internal conflict and an external challenge. The power to change his destiny was undeniably his. This was where love could begin to thrive. Looking into Mia's expectant eyes, he felt the shift begin anew. But the echoes from the outside world wouldn't let go so easily, and as he sank deeper into this urgent awakening, a new tension loomed over his heart, one that whispered of sacrifices yet to be weighed and challenges yet to be faced. Would he find the courage in the next moment to embrace a father's love over fear? As the phone buzzed insistently again, Jonathan's pulse quickened. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Jonathan's heart raced as he reluctantly silenced the phone, the vibration now a faint echo against the backdrop of his daughter's laughter. Mia continued to paint, her vibrant strokes painting herself into a world where joy and uncertainty coexisted harmoniously. Jonathan felt the heaviness of the decision lingering in his chest, a metaphorical curtain drawn between the man he was and the man he wanted to become. He took a step back and closed his eyes, focusing not on the chaos outside the small haven they've created, but on what was unfolding right in front of him. A realization gradually took root. His traditional measures of success had been fundamentally flawed. He thought of his career, a towering fortress built on accolades, lavish meetings, and the adrenaline of high-stakes negotiations. But what had it truly provided? A facade that camouflaged a gnawing void where genuine fulfillment should reside. With newfound conviction, he turned back to Mia, who was now deep in thought, contemplating her next artistic moves. "What are you thinking?" he inquired, a hint of tenderness underlining his tone. It was time to embrace the side of himself he had neglected for so long, the part that craved connection and authenticity.
"I want my painting to tell a story," she said, eyes glimmering with purpose. "Something that shows how we can see the world differently, like seeing beauty in the chaos." Her words struck a chord with him, sparking a cascade of reflections. Isn't that what he longed for too? The ability to embrace the chaos of his life and reshape it into something meaningful? The pressure of expectation felt lighter when viewed through this lens, prompting him to imagine a reality where he merged his roles as a father and a professional, not as dual identities battling for coexistence, but as harmonious elements of a richer life. "Let's explore that," Jonathan replied, surprising himself with the enthusiasm in his voice. They gathered supplies, the air thick with creativity. Each brushstroke from Mia ignited a spark inside him, urging him to reclaim his own artistic essence. He picked up a brush, even though his hands had long been trained for boardrooms rather than canvases. As he painted beside her, hesitant at first, questions emerged in his mind. What parts of himself remained laced within colors and contours? How could he allow that part to flourish, even amid the pressures from his previous life? In that moment, the foundation of resilience began to forge within him. However, the shadows of doubt crept in once more, whispering insidiously. What if accepting this new role meant abandoning the ambitions he had fought so hard to obtain? Could he negotiate his status while embracing his newfound identity as a father and artist? The struggles inherent in finding balance loomed heavier now that he could envision the vibrant life he craved. The fear of judgment and the fear of failure felt like a weight strapped to his back. "What if no one takes me seriously anymore?" he muttered, more to himself than Mia. "Why does it matter?" she replied, unfazed. "You're showing me how to be real. That's so much more important." Her unwavering belief in him pierced through his hesitations. Though she was just a teenager, Mia had grasped a life lesson he had long overlooked. Sometimes it's not the accolades, but the authenticity behind them that truly matters. The realization resonated with him, fanning the flames of his resolve. Suddenly, the incessant buzzing of the phone resumed, louder this time, a stark reminder of the world waiting outside. Jonathan hesitated, fear prickling along his spine. It would be so easy to retreat back to the familiar.
The moments shared with Mia offered a glimpse into a life brimming with potential, but could he truly abandon the responsibilities that had defined him for so long? He glanced at Mia, eyes brimming with innocence and anticipation. The decision loomed large, yet clear. Then, gathering his courage, he picked up the phone, intent on facing the reality that loomed just outside their little sanctuary.
This was more than just a call. It was a confrontation with the past, a challenge to relinquish the fears that had chained him for so long. As he pressed the button to answer, his hand trembled, and he wondered if this call would re-establish old patterns or signal a defining moment in choosing the path of authentic connection, both with Mia and ultimately with himself. The moment Jonathan answered the call, a familiar voice cut through his tentative resolve. It was Amanda, his colleague, unnecessarily buoyant as she launched into updates about work. The relentless cadence of corporate jargon felt foreign, incongruous to the vibrant hues splashed across the canvas before him. Each word dripped with expectations he had worn like a second skin, targets, deadlines, performance metrics, the very constructs he now questioned. "Jonathan, you there?" Amanda queried, her tone revealing an urgency he had trained himself to overlook. "Yeah, I'm here," he replied, though he felt miles away from the sleek conference rooms and high-stakes deals, spiraling instead into a realm filled with splatters of paint and laughter. "Great! We've got a project kicking off next week, and we need your input on the strategy," she continued, oblivious to the transformation taking place in his heart. The world he had once inhabited now felt as inviting as a steel cage, constricting and confining. But the resilience he had begun to nurture within him stirred uneasily at her words. "About that, I'm not sure I can approach it the way I used to," Jonathan found himself saying, the admission surprising him. "Excuse me?" He braced himself, taking an unsteady breath. "I think I need to reassess my role in the company. They've changed for me." An awkward silence lingered. He could hear the tap-tap of Amanda's fingers as they drummed impatiently on her desk. "You're joking, right? You can't just step back now. You've worked too hard to get where you are." Jonathan felt the weight of her expectations pressing down again, but he clenched his jaw, summoning the strength Mia had inspired in him. "I have to prioritize what matters most. I need to be present, not just at work, but in my life." He could practically hear her roll her eyes through the phone. "This isn't like you. You're making a mistake." "Am I?" he countered, suddenly filled with determination. "A mistake would be ignoring what I truly prioritize, my relationship with my daughter, the lessons in authenticity she's teaching me. If I can't be present for her, what's the point?" The call abruptly ended, leaving behind a silence heavier than he anticipated. Jonathan squeezed his eyes shut, battling the tightening pressure in his chest. His feelings of self-doubt wrestled with the undeniable truth that had continued to surface amidst Mia's colorful world. He turned back to the canvas, allowing its inviting chaos to immerse him.
Each brushstroke became a reflection of his burgeoning identity, a reclamation of the pieces he so desperately wanted to reunite. Maybe the answers he sought wouldn't come from the boardroom, but rather from a world steeped in creativity and connection. As he reached for more colors, envisioning not just a canvas but potential new outcomes, a torrent of emotions clawed at him, a blend of courage and fear. Could he sustain this newfound direction without sacrificing the professional persona that had been so difficult to build? Questions unfurled like tendrils of smoke, whispering doubts of capability and worthiness. Mia glanced at him, her expression holding a wisdom that surpassed her years. "What if the art speaks for you? What if it becomes your voice?" she suggested gently, a light illuminating a path he hadn't fully seen before. Her suggestion resonated deeply and propelled him into an internal debate. Was it truly feasible to merge his burgeoning creativity with his past? Could he redefine success on his own terms? That new opportunity at work lingered, tempting him with past glories, while Mia's faith in him nudged him towards the precipice of personal transformation. With a renewed sense of urgency, Jonathan forced himself to confront not merely the decision of his professional life, but what it would mean to pursue an authentic existence deeply rooted in personal growth. The realization was a blade cutting through the fog of his past. He was at a crossroads. Now, standing before a blank canvas, he had a choice to make. Would he yield to the familiar pressures of his former life, Or would he muster the courage to embrace this new path of expression, vulnerability, and connection with Mia? And as Jonathan dipped his brush into the paint, a realization struck him. This was not merely an act of creation, it was a declaration of his rebirth. The time had come to face the ultimate decision. Who would he become if he embraced this evolving identity? Would cultivating a life intertwined with authenticity and creativity lead to deeper fulfillment, or would it unravel the threads of the past he had worked so hard to weave? In that moment, Jonathan knew the next brushstroke could alter everything. Colors swirled and mixed under Jonathan's hands, vibrant hues forming chaotic patterns that mirrored the tumult inside him. Each stroke was a release, an attempt to unravel the tightly wound ball of secure expectations that had once defined him. Yet amid the chaos, clarity was emerging. He was not just an employee, he was a father, an artist, and a man in search of authenticity. After setting the brush down, he backed away to examine his work. The canvas spoke of possibilities and revelations, a visual manifesto of his current state. But as invigorating as the artistry felt, there was a gnawing anxiety that accompanied it. How could he step back from a career that provided stability, even if it trapped him in a world he no longer recognized?
He thought of Amanda's words ringing in his ears. "You've worked too hard." They hung there, accusing, as if his choices were weighed on a seesaw of ambition and fulfillment. Yet what good was ambition if it was devoid of joy? His phone vibrated beside the pallet, a reminder of the professional world that awaited his decision. Jonathan stared at the screen, hesitating. The name Amanda flashed, but he ignored it. Instead, he brought his focus back to the art before him, a silent conversation about who he was versus who he wanted to be. As he returned to painting, his mind wandered. Did others face similar crossroads? Perhaps they masked their own battles behind polished facades. Perhaps, too, they had realizations sparked by personal moments that paved the way for transformation. With every brushstroke, he became more convinced that what he created could serve as a bridge between these two identities. But what was he waiting for? A sign? A spontaneous epiphany? The realization hit him. There would never be a perfect moment. If he truly wanted to build a life brimming with authenticity, the onus was on him to forge the path from the fragments of his past towards the possibilities of his future. That night, Jonathan lay in bed, wrestling with the idea of a true pivot. How did one abandon a substantial career merely for the sake of seeking happiness? In stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of his art, his thoughts turned rigid. His well-paying job, the routine it brought, the respect he had earned among peers. This career represented more than just work, it was validation. Doubt seeped in as he visualized the faces of his colleagues, his boss praising the latest quarterly report. Detached from the colors of his art, he felt the dead weight of performance metrics creeping back in. Who would he be without all the accolades? Was he ready to relinquish that part of his identity? The question loomed large. What if failure awaited him on the other side of this internal war? What if Mia was a guiding light illuminating a path he didn't know how to walk? Strangely, the thought offered more comfort than anxiety. Ignoring the pressures exerted by society, perhaps he didn't have to find a dazzling success. Maybe he just needed a quieter truth. With a sense of purpose swelling inside him, he rose, pulled on a pair of sweatpants, and headed back to his easel. He would take it one step at a time. Jonathan began sketching smaller canvases, themes he'd been fermenting in his mind, weaving between his personal discoveries and the art he longed to share. Though he felt unsure, he knew he possessed the ability to channel his feelings into something tangible. Each stroke would not just be a representation of his growing self, but could also serve as a conversation starter, a medium through which to engage with the world anew.
As dawn's first light filtered through his studio window, he felt a renewed sense of breath, of longing to express what had quietly fermented within. Whatever the future held, he was ready to confront it. But in the clarity of that moment stood a daunting reality. Stepping back from his corporate life meant he would have to navigate not just his fears, but also the expectations of those around him. He would be forced to reveal his vulnerabilities, to face colleagues, friends, and even Amanda, with his new truth at the forefront. And as Jonathan prepared to paint his next canvas, a stark question emerged, one that clashed with the budding vision of his artistic life. How would he explain this new journey to those who lived in the world he was prepared to leave behind? Pressure mounted as he realized this internal struggle wasn't just about choosing art over a career. It was about redefining his entire existence. The path ahead was not clear, but he was ready to find out just how far it would take him. The next stroke could unravel his life further, revealing layers he had yet to discover. The morning felt different, charged with an unexplainable energy that thrummed in Jonathan's veins. Sunlight streamed through the window like a spotlight, illuminating unfinished sketches scattered across the floor, each an invitation to deeper exploration. He stood before the easel, a brush poised between his fingers, and with each tentative movement, he began to find answers hidden within himself. Jonathan let the bristles dance on the canvas, each stroke punctuated by a question, the what-ifs and why-nots swirling around his thoughts. He chose colors symbolizing his fears, muted reds and grays, but they didn't stay that way. With bold strokes, he layered vibrant blues and yellows over them, reflecting hope and resolve. The painting transformed. It became a visual representation of his emotional landscape, a testament to the contrast between his old expectations and his new ambitions. As he painted, conversations from the day before spiraled into his mind. The people he had once felt so close to now seemed distant, residing in a world where accolades transcended personal fulfillment. Their opinions had always mattered, but he felt the grip of that influence slackening. He focused on the canvas, not wanting to shape his journey based on their reservations. With a paint-smeared hand, he cradled his phone, the image of Amanda lighting up the screen. Their conversation lingered, her worried tone echoing in his ears. "You're making a mistake, John. You've worked so hard." But what did hard work equate to if it dragged one's spirit down? Clarity washed over him. He feared the disruption of his image more than he feared failure itself. In moments of stillness, he began to confront the risks of his choices. Could he forego the identity curbed by expectation in exchange for one that celebrated authenticity?
Images of his daughter, Mia, surfaced, her laughter vibrant, uninhibited. He wanted that for himself, to not just watch her embrace life, but to embrace it alongside her, entirely and unreservedly. Finishing the initial layers of his painting, he sensed a heavy stillness settle in the room. He had avoided the confrontation long enough, the urge to run from his choices. As he prepared to face colleagues and Amanda with his new truth, the thought of being seen as a failure gripped him, cold and heavy. But then he remembered, every bold stroke on the canvas came with risk, a freedom he had now embraced. Later that afternoon, Jonathan stood in front of his reflection, looking beyond the man who had excelled in corporate frameworks, examining the father, the artist, the seeker of fulfillment. He practiced, mentally rehearsing what he would say to Amanda, bracing for disappointment. Would she understand? Could she see this evolution and the necessity for it? His heart raced as he drafted a message, letting the words spill out, unrefined. "I'm choosing to follow my passion," he typed, suppressing his pulse as the send button lingered tantalizingly. Just as he was about to hit it, a thought struck. This wasn't just a confession, but an assertion of his worth, a declaration of independence from expectation. It would be more than a conversation. It would be a confrontation of his identity, a reckoning of who he was now. He hesitated, but finally pressed send, feeling the weight lift momentarily. As evening approached, Jonathan peered out into the dusk, the horizon blurring into brilliant colors, blending like paint on his canvas. He felt both terrified and resolute. This moment ranked among the most profound he had ever encountered, standing on the brink of self-discovery, knowing that each decision shaped a larger narrative. His heart buzzed again, Amanda's response lighting up the screen. The time had come for them to engage in the dialogue he feared yet craved. How she would react remained uncertain. As the words appeared on his phone, tension coiled tightly around him, propelling him toward an inevitable truth. Confronting Amanda could either ignite a new chapter of acceptance or unravel the remains of his old life. And as he braced himself for the words that would shape his future, he found an undeniable urge to paint again, to express all that was stirring within him as he waited. What would define Jonathan Torton now? Failure or a pursuit of authenticity? In that unresolved moment, he understood the stakes of his choices were rising higher than the vibrant hues on his canvas. The glow of the phone faded as Jonathan's heart thundered in anticipation. He drew a shaky breath, the thrill of uncertainty riding alongside his resolve.
Amanda's reply was instantaneous, her words a sharp contrast to the flood of emotions swirling within him. "I hope you know what you're doing, John. Let's talk."
Those few words ignited a conflagration of anxiety within him. They were laden with concern, but they also hinted at doubt. Could they have an honest discussion? Would she see the clarity he felt, or merely the chaos of a life about to shift irrevocably? Jonathan paced the room, feeling the weight of his decision to pursue art hanging heavily, challenging him to articulate his motives. He sensed he was at the edge of an abyss where every step forward demanded an acceptance of the unknown. Would he falter, retreating back to the comfortable chains of his corporate existence, or would he leap, regardless of the consequences? He decided to channel his trepidation into creativity. Grabbing a fresh canvas, he threw himself into the process. Each stroke, each layer began to coalesce into an ocean of colors, echoing the tumult of his emotions. He painted feverishly, feeling the brush become an extension of his heart, pouring out his desires, hopes, and doubts. The chaotic yet instinctual motions juxtaposed his reserved persona in the corporate world. Here, beneath vibrant hues, he was no longer just a man battling expectations, but an artist daring to express himself without hesitation. The hours slipped by, lost in the rhythm of creation, until the world outside faded into oblivion. With every color and composition, Jonathan forged a new identity. His thoughts flowed alongside the paint, each question manifesting through the canvas. What if this was the path he was meant to tread? What if leaning into his creativity fueled a new purpose? As clarity formed in the midst of chaos, he could almost envision his daughter beside him, sharing in the simple joy of discovery. At last, the piece rested, revealing a boundless sky, its edges kissed with fiery reds and oranges, symbolic of rebirth. He stared at it, breathless. This was more than a painting. It was a declaration of liberation, echoing the trajectory of his life. Jonathan felt an awakening deep within, a realization that art transcended mere paint and canvas. It was a vehicle for personal evolution. But the looming conversation with Amanda still tugged at his mind. He could wish for all the flourishing colors, yet it meant nothing if he didn't allow others to see his new colors shining through, especially someone as significant as her. What would come next? Would their bond strengthen through his honesty, or would it splinter under the weight of contrasting desires? With renewed determination, he picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Can we meet at the cafe tomorrow?" he typed, the message inviting her into the next chapter of his life, not as a concession, but as a call to embrace transformation together. He hesitated, wondering if he had the strength to reveal everything he had painted, to share not only the struggles, but his aspirations. As he sent the message, a quiet resolve enveloped him. Fate was unfolding, each step veering towards authenticity.
He was no longer in the shadows of what he could have been, but bravely fighting to define his own narrative. Jonathan laid back on his sofa, staring up at the myriad of colors on the ceiling, the remnants of his artistic endeavor swirling above him. He could only hope that his newfound path would resonate with Amanda, and that his leap into vulnerability would also challenge her own perspective. And within that moment of reflection, the air dense with promise and uncertainty, he understood that tomorrow would not only be a conversation, it would be a reckoning, an unearthing of hidden truths that would either solidify their bond or sever it irrevocably. The stakes had never felt higher, and anticipation buzzed through him as he prepared to face a tension-filled reality. What if the conversation did not go as he had dreamed it would? What if it ignited more conflict than understanding? But in his heart he cultivated hope, believing that the clash of their truths might also lead to an extraordinary reconciliation, perhaps even an acceptance of their intertwined journeys. And as the night deepened, he closed his eyes, ready for whatever revelation awaited him at dawn. Jonathan awoke to a new day, the sun spilling warm light across the canvas in his studio, illuminating the rich colors he had begun to embrace. The previous day's decisions still thrummed in his chest, a blend of anticipation and resolve. Today was not just about confronting Amanda, but about embracing the multifaceted identity he was forging as a father and an artist.
Standing in front of his latest work, he felt rejuvenated by the vibrant strokes, yet acutely aware of the task ahead. His hand lingered over the phone, considering the message lingering in the digital realm. Finally, it was time to meet Amanda and share the truth of his journey. He needed to articulate his transformation, not just for her, but for himself. The cafe buzzed with morning energy as he stepped inside, a faint scent of roasted coffee threading through the air. Jonathan took a deep breath and found a quiet corner table, a sanctuary that felt worlds away from board meetings and corporate decisions, where he could fully engage in this pivotal moment. As Amanda entered, he noticed the slight crease of concern on her brow. She settled across from him, coffee in hand, the silence heavy with unspoken words. "So, what's going on?" she asked, her voice steady, yet layered with apprehension. Jonathan studied her, recognizing the familiarity of corporate exchanges, but feeling the weight of personal stakes. "I wanted to talk about my choices," he began, pulling together the thoughts he had cultivated over the past weeks. "I'm stepping back from my role at the company." Her expression shifted, skepticism creeping into her eyes. "What? You can't be serious, John. Everything you've worked toward." "I know, but I've realized that ambition without fulfillment means nothing."
This past year, I've prioritized work and lost sight of what truly matters, my daughter and my art. Each confession felt like shedding skin. Amanda's gaze softened, yet shadows of uncertainty remained. What will you do instead? Jonathan felt a spark ignite within him as he articulated his truth. I'm going to fully embrace my art. I want to be present in Mia's life, to support her creativity and nurture my own. It's not about stepping back, it's stepping into the life I've been missing. The conviction in his voice surprised him, sounding reaffirmed by the strength he'd gained from his transformational journey. For a moment, silence enveloped them, heavy yet grounding. Then Amanda's initial hesitation buoyed into acceptance. "Okay, I get it, but how do you know it's the right choice?" "Because," Jonathan replied, "it resonates with who I want to be. I'm ready to foster genuine relationships, not just with Mia, but with myself." Truth flooded the space between them, creating a palpable energy that felt both raw and empowering. He lined up the pieces of his aspirations to expose the beautiful chaos of his journey. "I guess I never really understood how you could pivot so dramatically," Amanda said, her voice laced with newfound respect. "This is big." "It is," Jonathan nodded, grounding himself in the reality that decisions like these carried weight and meaning. "But I feel lighter. It's like unshackling years of expectations." Her eyes glinted with something akin to admiration. "And how do you plan to navigate all the judgment that comes with this?" "By owning my truth," Jonathan affirmed. "If I can be authentic, perhaps others will see what I see, the joy in pursuing what makes us human, not just a cog in the corporate machine." A sense of solidarity blossomed with Amanda as they began to navigate an uncharted territory together, a dialogue that was about more than just his leap of faith. "That makes sense," she replied after a pause, her tone softer, less judgmental. "I can respect that, John." With a signal of trust burgeoning between them, Jonathan felt the layers of anxiety lift. He could envision a world where he thrived, an artist who painted not just with colors, but with concepts, ideas, and renewed purpose. "Just promise me," Amanda added cautiously, a smile creeping onto her face, "that you won't forget your old team. We're still family." "Family?" Jonathan chuckled softly. "I guess that's a matter of definition, but yes, I want to keep my connections." He realized that even as he stepped outside the familiar big business persona, he still valued those relationships. The conversation shifted from worry to enthusiasm, and soon laughter bubbled between them, mingled with the sounds of the cafe. He felt invigorated as they talked about creativity, guiding Mia's artistic journey, and even discussing how Jonathan could merge his professional skills into his new existence as an artist.
The decision to step fully into his life was now confirmed in front of someone who had once only known him as the business guy. Jonathan found himself grateful for the weight that had shifted not only in his heart, but in the bonds with those who mattered. As they wrapped up the conversation, the cafe's soft glow seemed to mirror the fresh light illuminating Jonathan's journey. He was no longer cloaked in expectations, but rather unveiled, standing in his truth, an artist, a father, and a renewed man. Jonathan had achieved a breakthrough moment, transforming internal conflict into vibrant possibility. With determination set firmly in his heart, he walked out of the cafe, ready to embrace what lay ahead, an authentic life where passion and fulfillment flourished wholeheartedly, one brushstroke at a time. Now, if you're inspired by Jonathan's journey of transformation, you need to subscribe now for more exclusive emotional stories that can change the way you view your own life. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more people who need to hear these powerful tales of personal growth. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jonathan's incredible transformation and what it means for you. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Together we can uplift others.